Yo, what up, Night Nation? This is Alan, and you are tuned in to the UCF Football Updates podcast. I want to do another kind of impromptu podcast, similar to I did a couple weeks ago when I really just did the state of UCF football, but I focused on the offseason and then really took a deep dive into the offense. Didn't really get a chance to go into the defense, so that's what I want to get into today. So as we know, 2020 was a very rough year for UCF's defense, one of the worst defensive seasons that I can remember in recent memory. I started school in the O'Leary era where UCF quite simply was a defensive team. There wasn't many great offensive years under O'Leary when I was there, at least. I started in 07. There was obviously that first year that I was there at 07 with Kevin Smith, where he was the entire offense, essentially. There was the first year of Jeff Godfrey, had a pretty solid offense. And of course, the Blake Bortles Fiesta Bowl year, we had a really, really good offense. But that was when O'Leary kind of gave up the reins of the offense to Charlie Taff. And he really changed the game, offensively speaking. Obviously, the last 5-6 years, we've been known for an offensive team, but UCF defense, even through this, high octane UC fast offense, has always been solid. Pretty big turnover machine. During the frost and the beginning of hype, we were up there in turnovers gained, within the top 25. The defense took risks, is very, bend, don't break type of defense, but it was good. I mean, 2016, that first year of Frost, when Shaquem was defensive player of the year in the conference, we had a really good defense. So the defense has always been good. And, we know that our secondary is always very, very strong. 2020, Heupel's last year at UCF, the defense pretty much fell apart, which is crazy to say because it had 3 NFL players on it. And the craziest part was the secondary was the worst part of the entire defense. We were, I think, second to last in the country in passing yards allowed, which is extremely uncharacteristic of UCF. And that team had Richie Grant, Tay Gowan, and Aaron Robinson, 3 NFL drafted corners, 2 in the first 3 rounds. And it was one of the worst secondaries in the country by far. Obviously, we lost Antoine Collier in the middle of that year. Richie and Aaron didn't play the entire season. Neither did Gowan. So it ended up being, kind of obviously a lost season. It was the COVID year. It was weird. Anyways, the defense wasn't good. We gave up over 40 points to USF that season when USF was averaging, I think, around like 25 points a game. Anyways, first year of Gus Malzahn, obviously new defensive coordinator, Travis Williams, dramatically improved the defense. Just to give you some stats to show the improvement, obviously it wouldn't have been hard to improve considering how bad it was in 2020, but it is worth noting. First of all, in scoring defense, meaning how many points we allowed, we moved up to number 49 in the country at just about 25 points a game. Quite a few games where UCF was actually, forced teams to score under 20 points, which was, really good. There was multiple games in the teens that UCF, forced teams to score under 20. There was obviously a few bad games, the Cincinnati game, the SMU game with high octane, high power offenses. But here, put it this way. Bethune-Cookman held them to 14. East Carolina held them to 16. Memphis held them to 7. Temple held them to 7. Tulane held them to 10. UConn held them to 17. USF held to 13. UF held to 17. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 games where UCF held their opponent to 20 points or less, which is pretty impressive. So the scoring defense absolutely improved. Like I said, top 50 in the country. Keep going on these stats. Total defense, that kind of takes in obviously yards, yards per game. UCF moved up to number 53 in the country, allowing just under 370 yards per game, about 5 yards per play. So, obviously something could still be improved, but that was in the 70s, 80s in 2020. So we had a pretty big jump, 20 or so spots last year in total defense, gave up a lot less yards per play, gave up a lot less yards per game, which is good to see. We were 53 in the country. Obviously we want to be better than that, but still, not bad. Then we go to passing yards. Like I said, UCF was, I think it was either dead last or second to last in passing yards allowed. Well, UCF made a meteoric jump, their biggest jump out of any stat on either side of the ball, in passing yards allowed. We moved up to 35th in the country, only gave up 210 passing yards per game last year. Massive improvement. That was well over 300 yards in 2020 per game. So a huge, huge jump. Part of that, that 2020 year was a lot of the second year was freshmen, Corey Thornton, a lot of those guys came in as freshmen, and then they made, jumps last year. Devontae Brown made a huge jump. Corey Thornton made a jump. Well, he was about stagnant, but Justin Hodges, huge jump towards the end of the year. We had Quadric Ballard made a big jump. Devad Wilson made a big jump. So we had, moved up to 35th in the country in passing yards allowed per game. So that was really, really promising to see. Then you talk about also turnovers gained. We are in the top 40, so pretty good there. Overall, we produced 20 turnovers. That would be 11 interceptions and 9 fumbles recovered. Not UCF's best. If you look at, let's say, Cincinnati, they forced 30 turnovers and had 19 interceptions, 11 fumbles recovered. So, 10 behind them, which is a pretty big jump when you think of turnovers. That's an extra 10. That almost works out to be 1 per game. I mean, that could be a difference in a win and a loss. We know how big turnovers are. It wasn't bad, but I think we could have done better there, especially in interceptions. I think our guys, I think our leading interception last year was 2 as far as players. I know Hodges, I think, had 2, and one other guy also had 2 for us. So I think we could have done a little bit better in the turnover department. And then also the other big area where we kind of got worse and obviously made no improvement was the rushing defense. Rushing defense ranked 79 in the country last year. We got torched on the ground a lot of times, especially by mobile quarterbacks. Gave 159 yards per game on the ground. We saw specifically against high octane offenses. I mean, a lot of those yards came against Cincy and SMU. They torched us on the ground. Jerome Ford in the Cincy game had 4 rushing touchdowns in the first half alone. He went for well over 100 yards in that game. SMU's running back also torched us on the ground. Then we saw, mobile quarterbacks like Louisville, Malik Cunningham, guys like that, absolutely just torched us on the ground. So that's an area where we need to improve. We need to be able to pressure the quarterback more. We need to be able to stop the run a lot better. But let's talk about the defense and break it down by position group, right? So let's start up front, in front 7, the defensive line. Obviously last year, the defensive front was led by Auburn transfer Big Cat Bryant. He ended up being all first team, kind of was everything that he was hyped up to be. Obviously he graduates, goes to the NFL. He got a undrafted free agent contract with the Dallas Cowboys. The other big loss is in the form of transfer, and that's Cam Good. Cam Good really stepped up last year. He had a really good year for us. He had 3 sacks. He had 4 tackles for loss, and he had 23 tackles. He had an interception, 3 passes defended, 4 forced fumbles. So it's a big loss. And he transferred to Michigan, Big Ten school. So those are the 2 big losses on the line. Other than that, everyone from the line is returning. And I think it is going to be probably either on par with last year, maybe a slightly worse. But that being said, I do think there's a chance they actually do get better with internal growth, internal development, and some of the transfers that have come in. The line should be led by defensive end Tremont Morris Brash. He's entering his senior year. He's a former 4-star Under Armour All-American. Has been good every year, but has never quite fully put it together. Obviously, he missed some time last year. He got basically in trouble with the school and disciplinary reasons. But he's cleared. He's going to be back. He's going to be playing. He should be ready by week 1. Despite missing 3 games last year, Tremont still had 9 tackles for loss and 4 sacks. To go along with a pick. He was still one of the leaders on the team. He should be our best defensive end. So he returns on one side. Then on the other side, you could have Josh Seliskar. He he had a really standout freshman year. Last year, I think he was good. Might have slightly regressed, but I think everyone has said he's looked very good in spring ball. He should be, in my opinion, the other starting defensive end, opposite of Tremont Morris Brash. Salazar last year actually had a pretty decent year. He had 39 tackles, had 7.5 tackles for loss, and he had 3 sacks and 2 forced fumbles. So he's been a good Heupel recruit. Those should be the kind of 2 anchors on defensive end. Then as far as tackles, there's some good options. I think we're led by Ricky Barber. He should be all conference this year. He missed some games last year with a knee injury, but despite that missed time, he had 5.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks, 39 tackles. We know, 29 tackles and 5.5 tackles for loss. He came over from Western Kentucky. He was a freshman All-American. We know what he can do. He had some injuries last year, missed some time. He did miss 4 games last year, but he's a guy that could be all conference first team. He's got all the raw talent. He's big, he's physical. He had a really good year, freshman year at Western Kentucky, had a good first year at UCF. I think he's primed to be potentially our best defensive tackle. The other defensive tackle that probably will start is Keenan Hester. Hester stepped up at times last year. He did have 1.5 tackles for loss. He had also a sack. He's could potentially be the other starting defensive tackle. There's obviously Anthony Montalvo, who returned for a 6th year. He was actually on that 2017 roster. He's one of 4 guys that decided to return for that COVID, kind of got that free eligibility with COVID. So we have Montalvo or Hester that could make the other starting defensive tackle. Then the wild card is Lee Hunter. Auburn transfer. This guy has all of the measurables you want. He is a redshirt freshman, 4-star player, had an offer from every school coming out of high school, was highly recruited. He's 6'4", 320 pounds. This guy is the absolute game changer. He will give AAC offensive linemen a fits. If he puts it all together this year, he may still be a little bit raw. If he gets coached up and is ready to go this year, I don't see how he's not all conference. This guy is one of the best raw talent defensive tackles we've ever had on our roster, in my opinion, just pure raw talent out of high school. I don't mean he's the best defensive tackle we've ever had. I just mean pure raw talent. This guy is an absolute game changer. His size and his speed, you can't teach that size and that speed, the combination that he has. It's something that if he puts his technique all together, he's going to need to be double teamed, quite simply. He's going to give quarterbacks and opposing offensive line hell, essentially. Right now, I don't know if he starts. If the season started today, I don't know if he starts, but he's going to get there if he puts it all together. Then, the other kind of players that could play or will play is Landon Woodson. He had 3 sacks actually in the spring game for UCF. He's a defensive end, probably will play behind Tremont or maybe play behind Salazar, may get some starts during the season as well. He had a really strong season last year too, or not really strong, but he was good last year. He had a tackle for loss. He had a sack. He played in 8 games. He started a few of them, if I recall correctly, especially I think when we had some injuries there. He played. So he's going to be kind of that other defensive end that plays. And then you have KD Mcdaniel, the Kentucky transfer, who is listed as a linebacker, but he could be kind of that buck position for UCF. That's kind of a combination of a defensive end and a linebacker. He's kind of, I guess, maybe a tweener. He played at Kentucky SEC, 3-star coming out of high school. He should get some time. I think because we did lose some depth at the end, he may be someone that plays there, but he'll probably also get some time at linebacker. Hard to say right now. I think with his size, he's probably closer to a defensive end. So he may play behind Salazar. He may play behind TMB. He may be kind of that second rotation with Woodson, I think. So we got some depth on the line. There's no question. We lost some, but we gained some back. We got Mcdaniel, right? We got Lee Hunter. Montalvo came back. We got some experience there. I mean, between Woodson, Montalvo, McDaniel, Salazar, Ricky Barber, Tremont, I mean, these are all upperclassmen that have, besides Barber, that have played a lot of college football at a high level. So we got some guys there that are absolutely can play. So I'm excited about the defensive line. I mean, is there a chance that, you know, that some of these guys are just depth pieces and maybe don't become stars? Sure. But, you know, most of these guys have played already. Most of these guys have looked good already. You know, losing Good and losing Big Cat obviously hurts. But, you know, we got some players there still, and we have some guys coming in also. Let's not forget the freshmen. We have Jamal Johnson coming in from Miramar. He's a 3-star guy. We had Keenan Thompson coming in, 3-star, nearly a 4-star player out of Lakeland. He's very, very hyped up and looks like he could be really good. So those are even more depth pieces that we have that are already signed their letter of intent. But you know, even with the 2 losses, we have some guys coming in. I think the line is fine. I think it's either a net neutral, potentially a small step backwards, but if guys like Lee Hunter and KD McDaniel step up, this could be a line that actually goes to the next level, gets better, because like I said, the experience is there. It's just a little bit of depth, because some of those depth pieces are unknown, like Hunter, like McDaniel, and Hester to a degree. But these are guys, the rest of the guys, if they stay healthy, these are guys that have played and have played at a high level: Morris, Brash, Barber, Selskar. So I'm not too worried about the line. Let's move over to linebacker. We know that's the problem area. It's been talked about. I've talked about it on my page time and time again. I mean, Gus Malzahn brought in freaking 5 transfers at the position. So he clearly knows there's an issue there. T-Will knows there's an issue there. We had a lot of outgoing guys, none bigger than Tayden Bethune. Huge loss. He was our leading tackler last year. Arguably the biggest loss that we had on either side of the ball, transfer-wise. You know, him or Jalen or DG. I mean, I know those are all big names, but Tatum, just the fact that we were already hurting at linebacker, that to me was the biggest loss. I mean, listen to what he had 108 tackles last year, 5.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 2 picks, a forced fumble. I mean, he was all over the field last year. He played injured. He played with injuries last year. He had an elbow injury. He had a concussion. You know, he played. He was a warrior last year. And he bled black and gold. I heard there's some issues with the coaching staff. He's over at Florida State now. Big loss. You know, so linebacker was hurting. So, you know, Malzahn did his part in bringing in a lot of guys. He brought in KD McDaniel, as mentioned, from Kentucky. He brought in Terrence Lewis, a former 5-star linebacker from Maryland. He brought in Brandon Jennings, a former 4-star linebacker from Maryland/Kansas State, who are both immediately eligible. He brought in Jason Johnson from Eastern Illinois. So he brought in, and then he brought in Walter Yates, was a FCS guy that had some FBS looks. So he brought in quite a few transfers. Are they ready yet? All those guys I mentioned, none of them have really played at all. You know, some special teams for Jennings and some special teams for Terrence Lewis, but they don't have a lot of experience at the D1 level. Johnson does, but he was an FCS guy. So, you know, he was kind of all-American guy there. He could be really good. It's just none of these guys have a lot of experience at the FBS level. As far as returning guys, the leader is clearly going to be Jeremiah Jean-Baptiste. He had 51 tackles last year, 6.5 tackles for loss. He had a sack, he had a pick, he had 2 passes defended. He was good. He should be kind of the leader in the middle there. He's been good, but I don't know if he's a number 1, you know, caliber linebacker. Maybe we're going to see. He has a lot of experience. He's played every year since he's gotten on campus. He played as a freshman. Him and Bethune were in the same recruiting class. So he comes in as a senior with some playing time. Also, we lost Bryson Armstrong, who was one of our best players last year. So between that and Tatum, and then we had a bunch of other transfers leave that never really played. You know, the kid Cole Joyce, for the Arkansas kid. We had a lot of linebackers leave. But as far as ones that have played, Jean-Baptiste is coming back, and he's really the only one with experience that's returning. You also have the other Arkansas kid, Quaid Mosier, who probably at this point is going to be a backup linebacker, because we just don't have a lot of experience. At this point, I would think that Johnson is the other starting linebacker for UCF. He's just got the most experience, and Jennings and Lewis didn't play in the spring game. Right now, there's just not a lot of tape on them. I don't know if they're ready. Maybe in a month and a half or when the season starts, they will be. I think they'll get some playing time, and maybe as the season progresses, they'll get there. But right now, I would expect JJB and Johnson to be the two starters, with Mosier being a backup, as well as either Tlu or Jennings, or a combination of both of them. It's going to be kind of a committee there because there's just not a lot of experience. So linebacker could go one or two ways. It could go kind of like how we think it is right now, where it's like not a lot of experience and basically as bad like it was last year, or maybe middling, okay. Or these guys could step up. You could see these guys take a huge leap. They get coached up, they develop. Maybe Johnson really pans out with all of his experience. JJB takes a leap. Mosier maybe takes a leap, and maybe they improve. I don't see linebacker being one of the better positions on the team. I still see it being the worst position on defense, but maybe it does enough where, not missing tackles like it was last year, pressuring the quarterback, allowing some relief to the secondary. It's possible. It's possible that they do all that, and maybe they're just average, and that's enough because the rest of the defense around them is good. We need them to be better than last year, though. Just all the tackles that were missed, it wasn't a good situation last year. So let's see what Jennings and Lewis could do. I mean, we're talking about two former 4- and 5-star guys, had offers from every team in the country. They were teammates at one point. Let's see what they can do. I mean, if they live up to their potential, it could be a really good year at linebacker. Then we go into the secondary, which I always get excited about for UCF. I mean, it feels like every year the secondary is so freaking good, and there's so much to talk about there. I've hyped them up before and they've been bad, like 2020, but how could anyone have expected that with 3 NFL players? Just a weird year all around. But this year I'm excited. Last year I said it was like going to be some growing pains. This year it looks really good. Devontae Brown is going to be all conference. He stepped up and was one of our best defensive players last year. He had 33 tackles. He had 2 tackles for loss. He had a sack. He had a pick. He led the team, though, in passes defended. He had 12 last year. He really should have been all conference last year. He'll absolutely start at one of the cornerback spots. Like him a lot. Then let's other cornerback, Brandon Adams. He looked really good as a freshman last year. He stepped up. A lot last year. He gave guys off the line fits. He was really good for a freshman. I think he'll probably be the other cornerback starter. Could be Adams and Devontae Brown. Then the nickel position will probably be Justin Hodges. I've talked him up too. He really stepped up last year as well, especially towards the end of the year. He looked good. He had a pick, 7 passes defended, 35 tackles. He really stepped up. I started to notice him in the Cincinnati game, and then every game from there, he got better. Then the safety positions, Devon Wilson, likely going to, he was 2nd team all conference last year, should be bona fide starter again. And then Quadric Ballard, who was really good. He was 2nd on the team in tackles last year. I thought him and Brown, I think, could have gotten all conference last year. They weren't really recognized, but Ballard had 83 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 6 passes defended, and 3 fumble recoveries last year. Ballard was really under the radar, but was good. He should probably start at the other safety position across from Wilson there. And then backing them up, there's some options there. There's, we have Kobe Perry, who could, I would assume, be maybe possibly start at the nickel or back up Hodges. You have Corey Thornton, who's also going to play a lot, will probably be, could start or could be him or Brandon Adams could be. I think the only bona fide starters for sure are Brown, Devon Wilson, and Ballard. Then it could be Hodges that starts at the nickel. It could be Brandon Adams starts at the other cornerback position. Corey Thornton, Kobe Perry, William Wells, who looked good as a freshman, and he comes in as a true sophomore. He had a good year last year in spot duty. Then he had a big play in also the USF game. Then the backups, other backups. I mean, Marco Domio, who actually he transferred. I'm sorry. I'm thinking Jarvis Ware. Jarvis Ware, who was the Missouri transfer, was slated to be a starter last year, but then it tore his ACL right before the season. He's back, or should be back, and he could be a starter, or at least backup as he's getting fully healthy. Dylan Lester, who played last year in spot duty, would probably be a backup. And it's hard for me to not think that the Henderson twins aren't getting some playing time right away. They've already been raved about. The true freshmen, 4-star guys. They probably are going to get some playing time right off the bat. Damari and Jakari, maybe it's just on special teams, but they should get some time. And then Nakai Martinez. Everyone has been hyping up the Henderson twins, but especially Martinez. He's gotten a lot of hype surrounding him. Obviously, our crown jewel of Gus Malzahn's first class. He was a 4-star, our only 4-star guy, had an offer from everyone out of local Apopka High. Has looked really good in spring, obviously an early enrollee. He should get some time, whether it's on special teams or as a backup corner position as well. Those guys are just too good. So we are just absolutely stacked in the secondary. And then I think I mentioned Kobe Perry, who is FCS All-American, transfers over, ton of experience, obviously the FCS level. I mean, a lot of mouths to feed there. Might be a little hard to play them all, but those are all guys that have options to play. But definitely going to be led by Ballard, Devontae Brown, Devon Wilson, Justin Hodges, and then there's a whole host of other guys that can play. Secondary was top 35 last year, should move into the top 25. Just with the internal development that already happened, that will happen more. Year 2 in T-Will's offense. Also just guys getting better, transfers that have come in, and then the freshmen. I mean, it's a good situation in the secondary. So overall, year 2 of Travis Williams, I think everyone knows the role now. Devontae Brown has said that in quotes that, everyone knows what to expect now. T-Will is a hot rising coach. He looked good in year 1. Guys are feeding off of him. They're learning. I think year 2 under him is only going to be better. We saw the improvement. Defense saved the day a lot last year because the offense wasn't great last year. The defense was a big part of the reason we got 9 wins last year. And I think they're only going to be better. Everyone's talking about the offense, which should be dramatically improved, but expect the defense to take another leap. I mean, it depends on the linebackers. I think that's where there's the potential trouble. But between a really, really stacked secondary and a really, really good defensive line, and kind of a wild card at linebacker, I think at the very least there should be some at least marginal improvements, if not a pretty big improvement. But we're gonna have to see what happens with those linebackers. And defensive line has some questions, at tackle and end with depth. But if they stay healthy, it's going to be, those are some players there. So let's see what happens. I'm excited about the defense as a whole. I think it is going to make some jumps. I think they're going to get some more turnovers. We just got to see what happens with the linebackers. All right, charge on.